I'm Ben Edmunds, brewmaster at Breakside Brewery in Portland, Oregon, and I'm here with your craft beer and brewing tip of the week. I want to spend a little bit of time talking about water profiles and why not only having a set of standard water profiles is really important for your brewery, but also how they can evolve over time. We brew at 3 different locations and across 2 different water sources. That's posed a challenge in terms of kind of translating recipes over the years. Sometimes we'll find, for example, that we need to up a particular mineral salt in beers that brewed at one location in order to flavor match that beer for how it was tasting from other locations. Those are fun challenges to take on. It's important to be really controlled and specific in this approach. Those are fun challenges to take on, but they can be a little frustrating if you don't have a standard way of kind of managing your water profiles. With different people writing recipes across different locations and different kind of preferences for how any particular beer might be designed, we try and give people a lot of latitude who are writing recipes at Breakside the ability to express their creativity, right? To say, I want to use these malts, I want to pursue this style, and to not be too draconian about exactly how any particular beer must be made. But when it comes to water profiles, it turned out we discovered in 2017 that we had 75 different water profiles across all of our different beers. And that just seemed like it was way too much, because you'd go back, we'd try and improve a beer, we'd look at sensory notes from the previous batch of a small pub beer, and I'd look at the water profile, or the new brewer who is now running that pub would look at the water profile from that beer and say, why did we ever use this water profile? This doesn't match anything else in the entire archive of recipes at Breakside. And so a couple of our R&D brewers and I sat down a few years ago, and what we decided to do was to set up a set of 20 standard water profiles that people could choose from. And lest you think that somehow we're quashing anyone's creativity here with that, I still would point out that there's 20 water profiles that you can choose from. It's not just 1 or 2. But what it allowed us to do is really to look across recipes a lot more easily. So we could say, okay, here's the IPAs that all share the same 3-to-1 sulfate to chloride type ratio, or the 3-to-2 sulfate to chloride ratio. Now, what do we think these recipes have in common? Why do they all benefit from this? Or do we think that one of these recipes might be improved by shifting the water profile over here? It allows us a lot more kind of collective comparison when we're looking at our recipes. It also helps us improve recipes and beers substantially when we realize that we made a mistake. One of the challenges that we face with Augustiner, as lovely yeast as it is that it tends to leave quite a bit of sulfur structure. And it can accentuate bitterness, it can accentuate kind of roastiness. And so with some of our darker lagers, we kept noticing that there was this kind of elevated bitterness, elevated roastiness that, and roasty might be too strong a word, almost a kind of a mild astringency that we wanted to work out of the beers. And we, after looking at hops and talking with friends who brew excellent beers in these styles, we really kind of focused in on the water for these beers, and realized that what we really needed to do was just simply flip our sulfate to chloride ratio. That despite the fact that we were working with kind of a classic Bavarian water profile, that to get the softness we wanted with our yeast out of these beers, we actually needed to ignore what traditional water might look like and go with something that was a little bit more unconventional. But because we were able to do that with suddenly 3 or 4 recipes all at once, all of those beers took a big step forward simultaneously. It was like one of those moments you have where you're almost like, oh my gosh, why didn't we do this 2 years ago, right? And that was just one of those ways that by having that standardization, we were able to make a big improvement really quickly and be able to identify which beers we could apply it to all at once. It also allows you to migrate recipes as trends change. For example, in 2015, 2016, if you came in here and looked at most of our West Coast IPAs or our Northwest IPAs, I bet the sulfate to chloride ratio on those beers at the time was probably something in the 5-to-1 to 7-to-1 range. And now these days, the most mineralized you'll see for us in that extreme was probably 4-to-1, and that'd be rare. Most of our beers are probably in the 3-to-1, 2-to-1, or 3-to-2 type range for West Coast IPAs. We find that while we still get the level of minerality we want, we're able to get a cleaner bitterness in a lot of these beers. And it doesn't necessarily take away from any kind of the snappiness or drinkability. It's just taking a little bit of a kind of softening out that mouthfeel and allowing the hops to shine a little longer, allowing the bitterness to be more BU driven than it is mineral driven. If we had just had a hodgepodge of different water profiles that we were working with, we wouldn't have been able to migrate those beers slowly over time either. It's not just the overnight changes that I'm talking about with the dark lagers, but also with our hoppy beers, being able to kind of systematically move them down and see improvements across a wide range of the beers allowed us to update what those water profiles are. So while there might have been at one point a 5-to-1 water profile, if it's there, it's kind of retired at this point. It doesn't get used anymore. So we do constantly update those, and that's the kind of provenance of our R&D team and myself. We're always trying to work within a certain amount of limits. We don't let ourselves just keep adding on new profiles that randomly show up. So as one new one comes in, another one might get rotated out because we're finding that it's not really as relevant for flavor or trends anymore. To learn more about building a brewery-wide quality program, click on the link below